I strongly believe that the missing key with a much of higher education, particularly in business schools, is empathy and talking about things related to empathy. I think almost all of the stuff that I teach, um, it almost always comes back to subjects like psychology and economics, which, if you look at the general frameworks of these things, particularly in economics, and I would say that they would probably completely empathize with what I'm saying, is that there is a lack of empathy in any of these conversations that we actually have. I think the closest thing that we may have that replicates this kind of empathetic approach is something like repeated games. As far as I know, maybe there's new things that have come out in the last 10 years. But um, I think that this perspective that humans do not necessarily are treated more as agents, right? They're sort of devoid of the touchy-feely stuff that it often creates. And the central premise, I think, the central premise behind economics and psychology, I think are actually really well intended, but they miss out on a lot of social aspects that I think are incredibly important, like a social conscience, right? Like actually really understanding that there's more to groups and other people than just the fact that there's something that's taken at face value as an agent, or as an actor, right? Like something that is completely devoid. And I would say a lot of the simulation models that we have in um, organizational science very much lacks empathy, and and it really somewhat hurts when I see this, because I know that in almost all of the situations that I have been in, where, that the way that I have taken one way or the other, right? Like I have viewed something as like I am actually doing really well, and I'm growing as a person, and I'm really excited. It's all in the tone of how somebody delivers something compared to, where you feel completely deflated, um, and it just sort of ruminates with you for years and years, is that it's all about the approach of somebody actually addressing that you feel heard, you feel addressed, you feel that there is more to it. You feel that the other person that's sending that is, on your side. I think even within models of things like power, for example, um, we think of, you know, power as more in coercion, like getting people to do something that you don't want that or they don't want to do. But there's a different approach that sometimes is based on sort of charisma, but it's a different approach where you feel it's a collective thing where everybody is empathizing with everybody else and moving towards something, even when something bad happens, right? Even when that there is something that just doesn't feel good to one person, everybody stops and talks about it and empathizes about it. I think this, I've really begun, because I am naturally an empathetic person. I just assumed that everybody kind of approaches life in this way, right? Like I assumed, and it's such a stupid thing to assume. And I think I've talked about this before. I just assume that everybody is well intentioned, right? That they have great principles, they really want to do good for the world, that, that they're really there for other people. And the truth is that it's just fundamentally false, right? Like that is absolutely asinine false, but it's something that I kind of believed in. But I don't believe in that anymore, right? Like I think that was one of the biggest lessons with this whole reciprocity project that I got back of, trying to build something around reciprocity is it doesn't work. It fundamentally does not work because it's based on principles of where other people are kind and well-intentioned and all of those kind of things. But as I've done it, I've realized it fundamentally does not work. Right. So what can we do? I think based on this, given that there's many people that don't play that way, is that we need to actually teach about it. Right. We need to to highlight why this is actually a positive thing, right? Like the stuff that you learn in kindergarten actually does matter, right? And matters fundamentally for your performance. And I'm not talking about it in a superficial way, but I'm talking about like in almost all areas of your life, you're going to see benefits. So just like taking a pause, right? Like even within your families, within, business, within, um, social relationships, taking a pause and saying, I'm here for you. I really respect what you are saying and doing. Can I help? And there is something that's really important with this, though, is that you're not there to be a doormat. You're not there to always, and that's where I think empathy, like, that's where I thought empathy was, like, that's where my interpretation originally is I think is false. You're not there as the person that's trying to be empathetic to always be empathetic, right? You're there in case somebody actually needs you. But if they don't need you or they perceive they don't need you, you need to stand your ground and walk forward and have this sense of self that you are not going to be torn apart by it, right? Like because other people are not going to be they're not going to be nice, right? Like they don't play the same game, right? That they view they view empathy. There's a lot of people that view empathy as something to take advantage of, right? They view people that are kind-hearted as a target, right? Like a very big target, right? And I think that's where people get messed up. And it's sort of the more empathetic people is that you have to realize that there's many people that are very, very sleuthy. They may intentionally or unintentionally do it, but they view it as a target. And so part of being an empathetic person is reading the room of like when that is actually needed. And if you offer help, you and support, then and you do provide it and it's not returned eventually, right? Like it's never returned, cut off that relationship, right? Like why on earth would you be part of a relationship where you are constantly that's being used, right? That is not being empathetic. That is you being an enabler of a situation. And there's so many times that you actually see this, right? And so you have to cut it off. And um, and it's not harshness. In some ways it is, right? It feels harsh when you do it at the time, but it's you standing your ground for your own person and what actually matters. Right. So all of this coming back to where I began, is that teaching these dynamics, I think is super important, but very, very, if no, very few people actually teach about these things, right? And the way that we teach about it is so, I mean, I think it's often missing any value, right? So the way that, and I'm speaking for myself, right? The way I teach about things often misses the value on things, right? Like some of the frameworks that are really important um, in strategy, for example, sort of based on more economic logic, teaches us to be more exploitive, right? To look at situations and to exploit these situations, because those are moments for profitability. But I think a different way to look at this is say, wait a minute, there's something that's missing. How can I help with this particular thing that's missing? How can I it's not about exploitation. It's how do I it's not only like this sort of engineering approach is like this is a problem, I can fix the problem, but it's realizing that there's more to it. And it's more about resonating. And I know that this is such fuzzy stuff, but it's resonating with people's hearts, right? It's not resonating with the things. And if you look at most things that do well in this world, it's resonating with somebody's heart, where there's something that's actually missing deeply within them. They're missing in their soul, right? And all of this is squishy. I understand, but it's incredibly important to realize that it's all about figuring out this empathy thing where you're trying to capture how somebody is feeling, what's in their soul. And it's not like laying it on too thick, it's finding the right balance of where you are supportive, not being, abused and taken advantage of. Um, but at the same time, finding the right tone of approaching things. And that is something that is really novel to me. And it's really become more and more important to me as I grow older. All right. Take care and have a wonderful day.